Welcome back to Alchemical Astrology. I'm your host and celestial weather forecaster, Melusine, with the January 2023 Astrological Report. Let me preface this month's analysis by making it known that I am not a proponent of the Gregorian calendar, as it has no observable synchronicity to natural cycles apart from the seasonal markers which we tropical Western astrologers use as baselines by which to calculate planetary placements. One of those markers in the Northern Hemisphere was the winter solstice, which occurred on December 21st. In contrast, January the 1st has no celestial equivalent of note, but a good portion of the population still celebrates the beginning of a new year. So here we are at the precipice of 2023. In this report, as always, I will explain the main transits of the month, examine the mundane implications, and then move to the individual rising sign specifics. I can't emphasize enough the importance of physically communing with the visible planets in the night sky, as this is, in my view, the means by which one integrates the archetypal energies they emit, and thereby offer the observer an opportunity to integrate them. This is particularly important now, as it's my opinion that the collective is going through a global transformation that requires shadow work, and this is never easy or pleasant. Humanity as a whole is experiencing their dark night of the soul, and the stars are pointing to where the work needs to be done. Before we dive into that existential pool, I wanted to bring your awareness to the origin of the name January, as it has relevance to the overall theme I'm hoping to convey in this summary. January is derived from the Roman god Janus, and you can see in this graphic representation that he has two faces. In Roman mythology, Janus was present at the beginning of time, and his role was to guard the gates to heaven. From this vantage point, he could view both the past and the future, and he held court over all significant stages of life that brought about transformation. He also holds a key in his right hand, a symbol of his status as a gatekeeper and a deity of the liminal spaces of reality. For this reason, in their rituals, the Romans always made offerings to Janus before any other gods. Perhaps this is why the month dedicated to the gatekeeper was put first during the time of Julius Caesar, when originally it was month 11, and the month of March began the celebration of a new year. So let's, in our own way, pay homage to the spaces in between by looking for the signs in the sky that point to this energy. Step 1 is to follow the Janus head looking backwards. Let's start with the heavy hitters, namely Pluto, the Lord of Death and Transformation. I'm looking at you, Scorpios. We are all too familiar with the rising from the ashes default setting to this zodiac sign. Now, Pluto's been hovering in the sign of Capricorn since November of 2008, the most serious financial crisis since the Depression, thanks to predatory lending. Cue the Lehman Brothers. And I'm sure we all remember the corrective measures resulting in massive bailouts of banks too big to fail, and the ensuing response of the proletariat with the Occupy Wall Street movement. If we turn the clock back even further, you had Pluto in Capricorn in the 1760s. Shortly thereafter, the world saw both the American and French revolutions, and heads did roll, literally. Capricorn is Saturn ruled, and as such reflects structure, whether it's our bones and teeth as per medical astrology, or on a worldwide scale when it represents institutions, government, and centralized power from a top-down hierarchy. Introduce the Lord of the Underworld into this equation, and you have, well, heads rolling. Shadows are emerging in these areas that need to be exposed and transmuted in order for new structures to emerge, and the true age of Aquarius can be made manifest on a societal basis. It can be deeply disruptive to bear witness to the collapse of established methodologies and the fall from grace of world leaders, but that's Pluto performing its function. We are obligated to reevaluate where we put our trust and what foundations we choose to build upon for generations to come. This will be more pronounced as Pluto enters its anaretic phase. That is to say, the point it reaches the 29th degree of a sign and, in this case, prepares to transit into Aquarius in March of this year. Bear in mind, this ingress will be a teeter-totter ride, as Pluto will retrograde back into Capricorn, dip a toe in Aquarius, go back to Capricorn before it remains in Aquarius for approximately 20 years, as of November 19th, 2024. The implication here is that we will not be done with the dismantling currently in play for quite a while yet. Anaretic degrees are triggering, no matter what sign we're looking at, as it represents a crisis point of change. Anyone who has a natal planet at this degree, or a transiting planet aspecting this placement, will have this area of their chart catalyzed, and it would be helpful if you willingly stepped into the change, no matter how comfortable you may have been in the status quo. The floor is falling away, just as was depicted in the movie Inception, and you're going to need to find new footing to survive the implosion. If you had any doubts as to the validity of this statement, I need only remind you of what was started in 2020 when we had a stellium in Capricorn, where Saturn and Pluto were conjunct, and we experienced a global lockdown. Furthermore, on the mundane level, revolts by the populist movements are escalating in Brazil, Iran, China, and Israel at the time of this recording. As we enter 2023, there is once again a stellium in Capricorn, with Venus and Mercury hovering around Pluto's parking spot. I've elaborated on this current Capricorn traffic jam in my recent full moon in Cancer report, so for brevity's sake, I won't repeat myself here. I would like to point out, however, that 2 days after the full moon on January 6th, when the sun enters the 18th degree of Capricorn, it is lighting up the precise point where Venus was in the heart of the sun, what we astrologers call Cazimi, on January 8th of last year. This was one of 5 spots that form a star she precisely delineates in her 8-year orbit around the sun, and she's literally putting a pin into areas that are relevant to our individual life paths. Venus represents relationships, material possessions and resources, as well as our value systems. Look back to a year ago and see how this is being echoed for you personally in these areas of your life. On the winter solstice of 2020, we saw the commencement of a new 20-year cycle between Jupiter and Saturn meeting in the sign of Aquarius, which we refer to as the Great Conjunction. It's labeled as such since history would lead one to believe this heralds a major turning point in civilization. This is even more emphasized by the fact that the greater benefic Jupiter and the greater malefic Saturn have converged in an air sign, ending a 200-year cycle in the earth element. This 200-year cycle is referred to as the Great Mutation. In Greek mythology, Saturn, or Kronos, is a titan who castrated his father, thereby separating heaven from earth, after which he proceeded to eat his own offspring to avoid the same fate. As it turns out, that didn't work so well for him, as Jupiter, or Zeus, being one of those children, eviscerated Saturn to free his siblings, and subsequently rule from Mount Olympus. What does this have to do with mortal men? Well, I'd like to think there's divinity in all of us. And as a Jungian, I'm inclined to interpret planetary energies from the archetypal standpoint. So when these energies collide, it's time to pay attention, measure the movements, and examine the potential outcomes based on previous gear shifts in this direction. So while we're still facing the past with the first face of Janus, let's consider the last time there was a 200-year shift into air signs 800 years earlier. The cycle's duration was from approximately 1186 to 1405 AD. The Magna Carta was signed in 1215, limiting the rights of the monarchy and opening the division of power to the oligarchy. At the same time, Genghis Khan took over China and dismantled the Islamic Golden Age. We had the Great Famine of 1315, lasting 2 years and killing nearly 50% of Europe's population, followed 10 years later by the Black Plague, which traveled from Asia to Europe, killing 25 million people in 4 years. This catastrophic loss of life led to the Peasants' Revolt in 1381. Ringing any bells? In all this turmoil, the first cathedrals and universities emerged. Manuscripts were created out of paper instead of animal hides. Migration of Greek scholars from Constantinople to Italy due to the expansion of the Ottoman Empire seeded the Renaissance, which flourished under the auspices of the Medici family in the mid-1400s. For the record, I would like to say we are on the verge of a new Renaissance, and the birthing process will be just as laborious because the expansive forces of Jupiter are inevitably contracted by Saturn whenever they meet. It would also be advantageous to point to where the friction might be concentrated this time around. And anytime conflict's in the works, we just need to find Mars. The planet of war has been leaving skid marks in Gemini since August 20th of last year, and has been retrograde from October 30th of last year to January 12th of 2023. It will finally enter Cancer on March 26th this year. That's 7 months in one sign, when Mars on average stays in a sign no more than 2 months. Interestingly enough, in the first week of January, both Uranus and a retrograding Mars are occulted by the moon. I've pointed out the possible effects of a planet's energy being unplugged like this in my previous reports. And here's a chart showing the path of the lunar occultation of Mars. This being predicated by a Uranian occultation points to a significant karmic reset, which is happening simultaneous to Venus being conjunct Pluto. Big power plays on the world stage, in our personal lives, at the most intimate levels at the same time. We'll all be feeling this on the deepest levels. Bear in mind another Martian occultation will be happening on the 31st of this month, but the geography directly impacted is very different, as you can see here. To spice things up even further, Mars is out of bounds from October of last year to May of this year. Out of bounds refers to a planet's latitudinal position in relation to our equator and the Sun. If it exceeds the normal 23-degree declension, either north or south, it is considered out of bounds, as you can see in this graphic. A Mars out of bounds amps up aggression and violent tendencies. We now have an out of bounds Mars, moving direct in the sign of communication, the internet, and thought processes. Gemini, the sign of the twins, is mutable air and can be flighty and polarizing. So this long-lasting shift into the air element is likely to be remembered as being conceived in a millennial war of words. The vocabulary makes this perfectly clear. Cancel culture, gaslighting, shadow band, virtue signaling, social media influencer, cyberbullying, to list but a few. But it is my hope that out of the fire and ashes of the old earth-based paradigm, something new will arise and be breathed into existence by the collective, just as they did when Da Vinci was alive. I will present a summary of the Mars direct and Gemini effect on all the rising signs after outlining the transits in the second half of January. I know this is a lot to digest, but the roadmap I'm outlining is empowering, and that's the whole point of this exercise. Now that we've taken into account the broad strokes of mundane energies described by the outer planets, and how the personal planets are orbiting around the same celestial markers, let's round this up with a quick overview of the heliacal paths of the wandering stars in the night sky. In the Northern Hemisphere, throughout the month of January, you will be able to see 4 planets with the naked eye as soon as the sun sets. The red planet Mars will be in the east, Jupiter is overhead, and Saturn will be dancing with Venus in the southwest. Most noteworthy from an energetic perspective is the convergence of Saturn with Venus on the 22nd in the presence of a new moon in Aquarius. I'll do a full report on that lunation in the next 2 days. This Saturn-Venus conjunction is another celestial karmic pivot point in my view, since she is in her Aphrodite phase, and this will present you an opportunity to tie up all loose ends regarding old lovers and partnerships that no longer serve you in this transformative place of new beginnings. This also applies to your relationship with money, as this is also a form of energetic exchange. From January 23rd onwards, Venus, the evening star, soars away from Saturnian restrictions, increasing in brightness and apparent disk size at 90% illumination by early February, as she makes her way towards Jupiter to form a beautiful conjunction with him in March. So we have both benefics gearing up for a rendezvous, while Mars continues to fade in brightness and Saturn descends into the twilight. A turn of the tides is in the offing, and it's in favor of the positive end of the spectrum. Mercury, the messenger of the gods and ruler of Gemini, starts out retrograde in January and is the first planet to set after the Sun. Subsequent to its inferior conjunction on the 7th, it becomes morning star, and in its Promethean presentation, it can be seen clearly from January 23rd to February 13th, rising in the eastern sky an hour before the sun. As of January 18th, it will also be in direct motion. Mark the 22nd on your calendars as we are officially in Aquarius. Uranus goes direct, and this is the moment all planets are moving direct. Seatbelts on, folks. These are game-changing phase presentations. To top this off, the day Mars goes direct on January 12th is also the date a rare green comet, which according to astronomers, first blazed a trail through our solar system 50,000 years ago, gets closest to the sun. It will be most visible with binoculars as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity in pre-dawn skies of the Northern Hemisphere. February 1st, it will be closest to the Earth. Its head is pointing towards Cancer, so the countries most affected would be birthed in the Cancer season, including China, Iraq, Canada, and the US. Most importantly, Mars is going direct at the exact degree of America's natal Uranus. Expect a reset of this nation's Declaration of Independence that may include a sudden change in leadership thanks to that comet. Okay, deep breath. Pause for a moment to take this all in, and I'll line you up with Mars and Mercury stationing direct as applied to each of the 12 rising signs. Mars represents our will and motivation, what drives us and sparks our passion. For you Aries Rising people out there, this is your ruling planet. On the 12th, set your intentions around being proactive with your methods of communication, as this will directly impact your career. When a week later, Mercury goes direct in Capricorn in your 10th house of status and reputation. This may present some challenges on the part of all rising signs, as Mercury will be quincunxing Mars and squaring Jupiter. These are tense angles, so expect some resistance or opposition to changes you'll be implementing, but stand firm and stay true. Taurus Rising. The Mars momentum will pick up in your second house of money and your sense of self-worth. By the time Mercury goes direct in your belief systems, you'll have come to realize that a reset in your mind will give you the confidence to ask for what you want, as you know you deserve it. And how liberating is that for the start of a new year? Gemini Rising. By far, this Mars retrograde has hit you the hardest, and I can say that with certainty, as this is my ascendant. Mars has been mercilessly plowing through your first house of self-identity for months, and your ruling planet Mercury is in the 8th house of death and transformation. You have been literally saying goodbye to a past persona and reinventing yourself. No small undertaking, to be sure, but the payoff will begin to bear fruit in the second half of the month, when all the sky ponies are out of the retrograde corral. Cancer Rising. You have been tasked with some serious healing work in the 12th house of subconscious patterns and early traumas that have been internalized. This is the year you drop the cloak of martyrdom, sacrificing your own well-being for the sake of your partner, since Mercury has been retrograde in your 7th house of relationships. As emotional as this may have been, you will feel so much lighter by letting go of those woundings. Leo Rising. A reset in your daily routine and your approach to a health regimen will give you the impetus to take a leadership role with a new association or affiliation you've been investigating that lines up with your new attitude towards work and physical well-being. Virgo Rising. Take the next few days to be creative and allow for your self-expression to resolve any dissatisfaction with your career, as Mars is in your 10th house of vocation, while Mercury sparks your creativity in the 5th house. This is also the house of children, so there may be an empty nester situation for some of you, or a romance in the wings for some others. Either way, Mars will be out of the gate running, so keep your ear out for communications on the job front that spell opportunity. Libra Rising. As a fellow air sign, you are familiar with the Gemini vibe, but are a little more concerned with maintaining balance than the sign of the twins. Mars falls in your 9th house of higher learning, long trips, and basic belief systems. This will all open up for reformulation thanks to Mercury's retrograde in your 4th house of family and home. You could find yourself moving, selling property, or just reevaluating what it takes for you to feel secure. Scorpio Rising. This has not been an easy ride for you either, since your traditional ruling planet Mars has been in your 8th house of other people's money, taxes, and overall transformation that involves facing your fears, examining your compulsions, and obsessive tendencies. Fortunately, you are no stranger to shadow work, since this is your house. Meanwhile, Mercury has been pedaling backwards in your 3rd house of communication, siblings, neighbors, and the internet. As soon as the messenger moves forward, you will find a new way of connecting effectively on an emotional level, which will be reflected in your method of speech. Sagittarius Rising. Your arrow has been pointing to the house of relationships and open enemies, while Mercury has been gathering data in your second house of self-worth and material possessions. A re-examination of your value systems will have led to possible changes in partners, both personally and professionally. But this is a reflection of a new improved version of the Centaur, who's always looking ahead with your eyes on the target. It's looking like a bullseye for you. Capricorn Rising. The last few months have possibly been more of a slug than usual for the industrious and disciplined water goat. But you're not one to complain, no matter the task at hand. Mars has been grinding gears in your 6th house of work and daily routines. You will have felt this physically with Mercury in your 1st house of the body. The heaviness will be lifted soon enough, and you'll be energized to complete your to-do list. Aquarius Rising. You may have felt stifled in your creativity or overworked and resentful for not having a moment to kick up your heels and give yourself permission to play in the last few months. That's due to the fact that Mercury has been drawing your attention to 12th house matters that are tricky to navigate mentally. This has necessitated a release of old thought patterns based on buried traumas that have imprisoned you from fully actualizing your authentic self. Now that you're done with the energetic purging, prepare for liftoff. Pisces Rising. You beautiful mutable water signs have had a focus of pent-up energy in the domicile lately, with Mars retrograding in your 4th house. The family situation has brought about some challenges when it comes to your social sphere outside the home, as Mercury has been sitting in your 11th house of associations. It'll be much easier to swim in the waters with all planets moving direct, so the time of paddling upstream will soon be over for you. Well, that's the roundup for our launch into 2023 and a critical turning point for the decade as a whole, which I hope will prove more manageable for us all as a collective. I'll see you again for the new moon in Aquarius report in the next 2 days. Be well and keep your eyes to the skies.